Okay, how to build a streaming app according to a failed streaming app. SeeSo programming strategies, Star Trek Discovery, and the CW Seed advertiser model. Here, Sandler talks about how these services have to quote unquote like balance their library, right? Maybe she didn't say that, maybe that's me. Well, I mean, she certainly said this, but quote unquote, I'm talking about that. On 215, this idea of like acquisitions, right? There's another moment where they talk about, this is a network executive or a producer talking about Star Trek being the family jewel, right? So it's like, it's not only that, like, it's not, you can't just like, you know, get an entire sort of library of media and just sort of acquire it that way. They have to be picky and choosy about what they're getting, right? And making sure that there's like the right balance between, and then, you know, she points out that like it seems the difference at one point is like between quality and quantity. Like you need enough of this, you need enough of that. But in relation to this, right, again, this is the week where we're really talking about how the algorithm, and going back to like custom content clusters, right, and how it kind of strings you along, right? And so in a really, I mean, she even kind of dunks on them, but it's like, because you watched this of Netflix becomes SeeSo. You came to see this, so you might like this, right? But this is basically the kind of, I mean, she points out that studying these services get us a sense of their kind of nature, right, and the character of them. But this is the structure of streaming media, right, where it's a kind of chain. It strings you along, right, which means there needs to be enough media that can be kind of linked into a chain, right? The Office to Parks and Recreation, right, to 30 Rock, right, to SNL, right? But you need, you know, all that, the licensing to all that content. NBC thought that they had this kind of figured out. Now here's a really kind of important point and concept that I do want to sort of spend just a tiny bit of time on. But Amanda Lotz is a TV scholar who's come up quite a few times, and we haven't actually read her. But this is on 216, that final paragraph. But this idea of, it's in red so you know it's important, phenomenal television. It's a phenomenon, right? And I think, you know, industry, like an industry term would be something like must-see TV. Prestige television would be another. But what this is on 216, Amanda Lotz in The Television Will Be Revolutionized notes the role that phenomenal television plays within the ever-expanding digital programming landscape. She defines the term as a particular category of programming that retains the social importance attributed to television's earlier operation as a cultural forum. So, TV as cultural forum. A place where people congregate and they talk about what's going on in the culture. This is the earlier function that television had that, you know, as we've observed or people have argued, isn't really the case anymore. But that same, and this is what, you know, I think it was Alec who brought this up as the idea of like the water cooler, right? You know, which is, you know, speaks to a particular type of lifestyle, you know, at the office in a particular moment in a type of society, right? That function has carried over to streaming, right? So if we think about the water cooler, right? The idea is that you watch television after you get off work on prime time at 8 o'clock on a Thursday. That's must-see TV, right? On Friday at 9 a.m., you go to work, you get your water, you get your coffee, and you congregate and you talk about it. This is tied to a particular notion of time and work and leisure in capitalism, right? So it's oriented around the 9 to 5. However, if streaming is so asynchronous, right, and so democratic, right, and it's so, like individual, what does it mean that there's still a notion of the cultural forum? It's just abiding by a different, more dispersed time. What I mean by that is that, yes, we might not be going to the office, and we might not be all watching at the same time, but I can guarantee you all, that we all, at least when we weren't in this crazy kind of set of circumstances, would watch an episode of any given show, whether it's The Mandalorian or Stranger Things, come to school the next day and talk about it. And it's that kind of the cultural significance, but also the peer pressure that still oriented us for the media to function in the same way. The reason I'm bringing this up is that it's important to kind of note these sort of affinities and genealogies, because it starts to trouble the notion that this is so different and so unique and so new, and we've never seen anything like it, but it's still functioning in the exact same way. So that's part of what I want to point out, is this notion of time, right? And also the social function. The other point I want to make out, or pointing the point out, is that every producer of television probably tries explicitly to make phenomenal television. So if we think about Stranger Things was their example, like legitimate phenomenons, right, that everyone has to quote unquote watch. Think of like The Mandalorian. Think about Game of Thrones. What becomes a phenomenon, it's similar to a cult film, right? It's like you can like try and plan to make a cult, but whether it becomes a cult film, whether it becomes one or not, is kind of out of your hands, right? So it's like that's part of it. I'm more interested in our participation, in making these things a phenomenon, right? It's ultimately, the labor and the work of the consumer that makes this into must-see TV. Enough people need to watch it, and enough people need to see it. Again, if it's not clear, I hope that, because of the class, and not just because of the class, but because of, everything that you've done so far while here, and just, the kind of everyday practice of critical thinking, I want you to be very observant and to think about how, like, Tiger King is exactly this, right? It's become phenomenal television, must-see television that everyone's talking about, everyone's making memes about, everyone's posting, and that kind of adds and feeds into this circle, right, of it becoming further phenomenal television, right, which it was primed to do anyway because it is a Netflix production, and they already have the infrastructure of producing phenomenal television, whether it's Stranger Things, so it already has an audience that's waiting for the next thing. But I just want you to be thinking about your and my role, and what are we doing when we're constantly promoting and talking about this in the larger scheme of these things, right? So for CBS and All Access, their phenomenal television was Star Trek, right? And if you think about all the buzz around Star Trek Discovery, but also Picard, I think it's operating exactly in the way that both Lotz and Sandler are talking about. I don't think that it's been as successful as they would have liked it to have been, both Picard and Discovery. But I do certainly know that I've seen enough people talking about trying to get access to those texts, right, to those shows, because they were important enough to them, right? So they point out that for CBS, the franchise strategy was something that they started from the get-go, while with Netflix, it took them a while to kind of get into the franchise game, right? Finally, in this section, she talks about CW Seed, And I specifically want to kind of point out their interest in like the youth demographic, right? Because it's a demographic, it's a target, right? We're going to corner the market, right? And their way to do that was to embrace the online platform very, very quickly, and also the synergy with YouTube. Okay? Moving on.